Hey, Allison Verhalen here, coming at you live for today's Marketing Monday. And today I want to talk to you about your brand story. What is it? How can you write it? How can it help you stand out from the crowd? Because that's what this is all about, right? Is making you stand out from the crowd, because there's literally millions of blog posts being written and published every single day. There are lots of people out there providing the same or similar services that you provide. So how do you make someone choose to work with you over someone else? There are a lot of different ways to answer that question. I will cover one of them in this video, and that is your brand story. How can it make you memorable? So I always like to start with my brand story. That's a great way to think about it, right? So if you have not already heard, my story is that I always wanted to be a writer. Little baby Allison knew day one, wanted to be a writer, was told, writers don't make any money and you should really choose a more practical career, honey. So, all right, I figured I would work in publishing, because I figured if I couldn't make a living writing books, maybe I could make a living making books. So I majored in English and psychology, which turned out to be the perfect degree for what I'm doing now. Little did I know, had no clue this was an option. Like I said, thought I wanted to work in publishing. Graduated in 2009. For those of you who remember, that was right after the job market crashed. So there were no jobs to be had in publishing or really anywhere else. So I ended up just answering phones. It was a terrible job and I hated it, but it almost paid the bills for a while there. Ended up between jobs at one point. My roommate at the time, her dad, who was an attorney, was awesome, offered to give me stuff to do around his office until I got back on my feet. And one of the things he needed was someone to write blog posts for his law firm. And he knew I had a strong writing background, so he offered me the gig. And I was like, what? I can get paid to write? Seriously? Yeah, sign me up. So I jumped at that chance and started writing blog posts for him. And pretty soon I was writing blog posts for him on a monthly basis. And then for an associate of his, and then for some friends of mine. Did eventually get another day job, but I kept writing on the side and it just kept growing. More and more people needed this. So I eventually got to a point where I could quit the day job and have been doing this ever since and living happily ever after the end. I shouldn't really say the end because my brand is constantly evolving. It's more of a to be continued, but I do have to end the story somewhere so that I can get to the tips that you need to create a compelling brand story. So first of all, why? Why bother telling a compelling brand story, right? So like I said, you're not the only one who does what you do. You need a way to stand out from the crowd. Brand story is a great way to do that for a number of reasons. It tells people who you are, right? My brand story tells you a lot about me and the fact that I'm not doing this just because there is a certain amount of I stumbled into it and realized I could make money doing this. And so I pursued it. But there's also a genuine passion for this that has been with me since I learned my alphabet, right? Always wanted to be a writer, a storyteller. I just didn't realize there was an option where I could tell other people's stories for them and get to know more about them and their history and their brand story, and then turn it into a story for them and then put it up on their website or have them put it up on their website, whatever, right? So that tells you a lot about who I am as a person and why I'm doing this, right? Because I think now I realize, maybe at the time I didn't realize, now I realize there are lots of different ways that you can make money by writing. And there's a reason that I do this over any of those others. Part of it is because I stumbled into it, but it is also because the marketing and the strategy and the SEO side of it have really just sucked me in. I had no idea I would be this compelled by numbers. Never would have suspected that. But I've actually found that, again, those numbers tell a story. And that's what pulls me in, is that story. People are primed to relate to stories. That is why it is so important to tell your brand story. People want to know the story of you. I heard I don't know if I'd call it a joke, an anecdote, kind of an explainer of the difference between North and South way back when I was a kid, right? It's like if you're walking down the street with someone from the North and you ask, who's that guy over there? They'll be like, oh, that's John. I didn't ask who his name. I asked who he is, right? If you're walking down the street with someone from the South and you go, who's that person over there? They'll be like, oh, that's Chad. He's on his second marriage now, but he still has kids from his first marriage, but they all get along great. First wife, second wife, it's all good. He's currently working for John over at that farm over there. He's inherited the farm from his blah, 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 right? He'll tell you his whole life story because he's not telling you the guy's name. He's telling you who the person is. Think of your brand story that way. I could say, hey, I'm AV Writing Services, the end. And people will go, okay, why should I care about AV Writing Services? Why should I care? Who is Allison Verhalen? Your brand story is the story. It could be the story of you if you're a solopreneur. It could be the story of how maybe you and some colleagues came together and decided that you could do this business together. How did that happen? What was that conversation like? How did you end up sitting down over coffee or beers or whatever and get to this point? And then what did that look like once you actually started doing it? That is who you are. That's not what you are. That's not what you do. That is who you are. Your brand story is the story of who you are. So great. Now we know why it's so important. How do we do that? Whole different question, right? I have a few points. First of all, I have a whole other video presentation I've given all about storytelling in marketing where I use the story. Actually, I have a couple others. One is the story of Cinderella and how you can apply that to your marketing story, where you've got the protagonist in this case is going to be your customer. So in most of the content I create and I encourage people to create for their brands, it's all about the customer. They need to be front and center in the story. They are the main character. You want to have them start off in this pain point and then make things worse for them and then show them how awesome their life can be once they've got your service, but then remind them at the very end that they have not yet gotten that service yet. So they're still in that pain point. And then you don't give them their happily ever after because they have to call you in order to make that happen. Right. So very, very briefly, I go much more in depth into that, but at its heart, that's what that story is about. I also talked not too long ago, I had a different video about the hero's journey in content marketing. And that's a different formula, but how you can use that to make your marketing really powerful. Right. So the point behind all of that is that one of the things those two things have in common is the customer is the main character. 99.9% of the time that should be the case, except when you're telling your brand story. That is the one time where you get to be the main character and you get to say, hey, this is what happened to me. This is what I was thinking about. This is what I saw. And this is what I decided to do about it. And now I have this business. So you get to talk about yourself. There is a caveat to that. So I have seen other businesses write their brand story in a way of, hey, I saw this service. Or I saw people were not able to take advantage of this service for XYZ reasons, or I saw this was changing and not a lot of businesses were taking advantage of the change. We could talk about AI right now, right? I'm sure that's going to be a huge impetus in a few years where people will be like, yeah, AI took over. And so I decided to do XYZ because of that, right? Because people were not adapting. So that can be an example of where you put your customer into your brand story because it's all about what you were seeing that was not benefiting them. And I was actually talking to someone not too long ago who started her business because she ended up in a certain situation and needed help and was looking for someone to provide this service to help her, could not find anyone who does what she is now doing. So she educated herself enough to get herself through that situation and now provides that service that she was looking for and could not find. So if you are her ideal client and you are in that situation and you find yourself on her website, you better believe that's going to resonate with you because now you know that she understands your pain because she's been there, she's done it, she knows how frustrating it is. The whole reason she set up her business was to help you through it so it could be less frustrating for you than it was for her. How is that not compelling? How are you not going to at least give her a call, right? So by telling that story, that again gets people to resonate with you, and it tells them a lot about who you are instead of just what your business is or what you do. So next up is the conflict, right? So again, I could say I started my business, AV Writing Services, because I really like writing and I realized I could get paid for it. The end. That's really boring. First of all, it's all about me, right? Even in my longer version, even though it was centered on me, there was a fair amount about the value that I was providing to people because they kept hiring me to do what I do for them. So there was clearly a need that was being fulfilled. Whereas if I just tell you I like writing and I realize I could get paid for it, you're like, great. What does that have to do with me? Why should I hire you to do what you do for me instead of someone else, right? There's a lack of conflict there. Every good story needs a certain amount of conflict. It could be the economic downturn that forced me to change my career plans. It could also be, I think that was a blessing in disguise now that I couldn't work in publishing, because shortly after that, there was the dramatic rise in ebooks and self-publishing, and that completely upended the publishing industry as we had known it. So that is also something to take into account. So keep that in mind as well, that it is always about this conflict, and then how do you resolve the conflict. I could also talk about the fact that my first client, who was writing his own blog posts himself, don't ever let lawyers write their own marketing content. They should not be allowed to do it. So he, taken up a lot of his time, not the best use of his time. He could be using that time to serve his clients and actually make money for them and make money for his business instead of writing these blog posts that were not good. They were just not good, right? So by having me write them for him, they were much more effective, and it took that off his plate, and he was able to focus on doing what he does best while hiring me to do what I do best, to create content for his website. And that effectively brought in business for his law firm. After 6 months, he told me I had brought in $75,000 worth of business to his law firm just through the blog posts I was writing, right? So that conflict that I resolve for a lot of my clients is usually, where are my clients? Why don't people understand the value I provide? Why do I get calls that are way off base, right? And it's because either you don't have online content or it's not good online content. It does not effectively position you as a thought leader in your industry, and or it does not educate people on who you are and what you do and why they should trust you as the expert over telling you what to do, because no one likes to be told what to do in our own jobs, right? But you get those calls, and it's because you have not educated your prospects. So that is it. That is everything. Oh, no, that's not everything. Next up, what do you do with your brand story? So now you've got this great brand story. What do you do with it? It should always take a backseat to the rest of your content, right? Most of your content should be customer facing. It should have that you all over it, not we all over it, right? So it should be talking directly to your customer, and again, putting them in the center of the story. But before they reach out or give you that call, schedule a consultation, whatever that almost final stage is, right? They're going to want to know a little more about you. So that's when they're going to go usually to your about page or your bio on social media. That can be a great place to put that that brand story. You could also include, definitely in your social media profiles, you can also include your brand story in your mission statement for your company, or even have it take the place of your mission statement, right? It can be really good to go back and remember why you're doing this, and to have that, whether it's pasted on the wall or somewhere where people can see it every day, just as that reminder of, this is how we started. This is why we started. Let's keep this front and center in everything that we do. So your brand story should absolutely be for the people who want to know more about who you are and what you do and why you do it. But it can also be a great reminder for yourself and for your team as to why you're doing what you do. So that is everything that I have for you today. If you have any other questions, you can check out more content like this over on my website. That is at AV, as in my initials, Allison Verhalen. So that is avwritingservices.com. And you can reach out to me directly at info@avwritingservices.com. That's it. Have a great week and happy blogging, everyone.